I remember when Omarchy first launched and was getting its first wave of attention, and if you've been around in Linux for a while, you've probably seen this exact same thing happen again and again and again, and it's going to happen more times into the future, and right now it's happening with CashOS, it's happening with Bazite, and it's happened with many in the past. Some new project pops up, it does something interesting, whether it has an interesting rice, some interesting technology involved in it, whether it is basically just SteamOS based on Fedora, and then suddenly, this is the distro that every new user must swap to. This is the distro that everyone should be using. It remains to be seen how much staying power any of these projects actually have, where we'll be, 5 to 10 years from now. But right now, these distros have captured the mindshare of the new Linux user. Most of them aren't thinking about projects like Fedora or Ubuntu or Arch Linux. Whilst us as established users know about these projects, they're not the projects that are getting recommended to people. But right now, I think we can make an educated guess on how this is going to go for Omarchy. Just the other day, Omacom Foundation launches with $8 million. This non-profit foundation will hold the trademarks, fund the infrastructure, promote the work, and support the open source projects and developers Omarchy depends on, with these 8 founding patrons: Toby Lutke, CEO of Shopify; Patrick Collison, CEO of Stripe; Mr. Dell himself, Michael Dell, chairman and CEO of Dell; Jack Dorsey, Blockhead and chairman of Block, formerly of Twitter and also Blue Sky; Matthew Prince, CEO of Cloudflare; Brendan Irabay, co-founder of Sesame and Oculus; Jason Fried, CEO of 37 Signals; and DHH himself, all contributing $1 million each. Now, say what you will about DHH as a person and Omarchy as a project. This is not an insignificant amount of money. This is $8 million. This is multiple times over what both the KDEV and GNOME Foundation combined make. Not just like individually, combined together make. I would be surprised if all of the funding focused around the Linux desktop got anywhere near $8 million. Maybe it does, but this is a massive injection of money. And some of that funding is going directly to Vaxry, the creator of Hyprland, fully funding the development of that project for 3 years, with the possibility of extending it out to 5 years. And whilst this is a lot of money, it's also just the initial round of funding. I have no doubt over the coming months, over the coming years, more and more funding is going to be done. Because you don't just go and fundraise $8 million and say, you know what? We're done. No more funding. Everything is over now. And even if this money gets absolutely wasted away and is used on absolutely nothing productive, this is $8 million. And I know I keep saying this one. I keep hammering on about this point. That is a lot of money. I shouldn't need to say that. That's a lot of money. And the thing that I've been saying was going to happen for multiple years now, if you keep pushing it, looks like it is going to happen. This is the kind of funding that the traditional Linux desktop ecosystem absolutely dreams of, and is basically only seen by the Linux Foundation. There's not a single desktop project outside of something that was just, backed by a big company like VS Code, for example, or Bitwarden, or things like that, where, there is a company specifically either focused around the product in the case of Bitwarden, or it was already a big company in the case of Microsoft and VS Code. But the traditional projects that just started as this, grassroots, open source, free software thing, none of them see this kind of funding. And the important thing here is this is well more than enough to bootstrap an entire Linux ecosystem that is completely parallel to the traditional projects when, project goals don't align. They need to be paying very, very close attention to what they do next and carefully think about their next moves. Because if you are not careful, this will spiral well out of your control. And just saying it's bad, and just saying you don't like it, or saying this project doesn't deserve the funding, or, registering domains like cucklinux.com is not going to make this just go away. This is not something that the Linux ecosystem, the traditional desktop projects, have any control over. This is something funded entirely outside of that. This is not going away. And this is something you are going to have to deal with and decide how you are going to behave around it. I don't know if this is going to be a good thing, and if this is going to be the reinvigoration the ecosystem needs and leads to very important projects actually getting the support that, frankly, they have deserved to always get. If this turns into a bad thing and turns into a complete corporate takeover of the desktop, or if this is just $8 million or more that gets absolutely flushed down the drain with nothing of value produced. Only time is going to tell on that front. But this is just one thing alongside a massive set of shifts happening on Linux. I've talked about this in many videos previously, but it's relevant here as well. Valve funding KDE development, firstly through Blue Systems, now through Tech Paladin. There's a whole mess of why the contract moved over. It's basically the same people that were at Blue Systems who are now at Tech Paladin. Not really relevant here. You can look into it if you really want to. Along with this, they've been funding a lot of relevant projects to the things they're doing in Linux gaming, some of which funding directly from the ground up, like the creation of the FEX project for playing x86 games on an ARM system, sometimes directly hiring developers who started the project as an open source thing, like with DXVK, and then bringing them into Valve, funding additional work through companies like Collabora to either work on drivers or work on Wine or various things like that, or just directly monetarily supporting projects like Arch Linux, for example. It's not entirely clear the full extent they're involved in, but these are just well-known, documented cases. I'm sure there's a bunch of other things that we're going to find out over the coming years, and probably a bunch of other things which are not really going to be known until whatever next generation of hardware they end up doing. Or if the next thing they even do is additional hardware, or maybe they work on something to get kernel level stuff working, or work with anti-cheat companies, which is something we know they've been doing. Again, not really sure exactly how much they've been doing so. Then you have companies like Framework going and sending out devices to various projects, going and funding different projects. Pretty much anything you've probably heard of likely has had some sort of either direct funding or device sent out to them. Of course, it's nothing like the $8 million of Omacom, but it's this wide net of support that's affecting a bunch of different projects, some of which are competing, some of which work together, but just a bunch of projects all doing really cool things in the Linux space. Along with recently stating on Twitter, the Fedora version of the Framework Laptop 12 is outselling the Windows version 10-1. It's the year of the Linux desktop. It's a laptop, doesn't matter. Now, to be completely fair here, we don't actually know how many of those are using Linux, because when you buy the Linux version, you're not paying for a Windows license, so the device is a couple $100 cheaper. And with hardware prices being the way they are, any somewhat savvy buyer is probably just going to buy the Linux version, and then if they want Windows, just install Windows on it. Am I saying there are 0 people buying the Fedora version who use Fedora on it, or some of the Linux distro? No, but the 10-1 number is just a little bit suspect without actually being able to verify what is actually happening here. But we also can't discount the government funding through things like the Sovereign Tech Fund. This is for KDE. They got €1,285,200. Unlike with the funding of Hyprland through Omacom, this funding is specifically earmarked for certain kinds of work. Some of that work does translate to the average everyday user through things like, better testing and things like that. But a lot of the changes here are sort of more a enterprise kind of thing. So maybe we'll see something happen in that space. As I've said in prior videos, it would be very cool to see KDE actually used once again on those enterprise distros. It was done in the past. it can certainly happen again in the future. And then, very much thanks to Valve, but also the general excitement around Linux as a platform, we are now seeing like the possibility of other game launchers, other game clients actually coming to Linux. This is GOG Galaxy. They did say about 10 years ago they were going to do it. That never happened. But 10 years ago, there also wasn't this kind of excitement around Linux. Now, though, it's very different. Along with that, we also have the Epic Games Launcher, not through a fully official confirmation, but a guy at Epic on the Discord saying it's going to be happening soon. What that would mean for a game like Fortnite, for example, again, remains unclear. I would be very surprised to see Epic Games come to Linux without also Fortnite. And that is one of those things which some people are locked on Windows for. They play the one game that they want to play. And if that game is not on Linux, they're not on Linux. And if a game like Fortnite were to come to Linux, that might convince other major titles to do the same as well. Again, this is just speculation. We don't know what's going to happen. But as things get more popular, that possibility becomes greater and greater. All of us joke about the year of the Linux desktop all of the time. Current year +1. Next year it'll be the year of the Linux desktop. But this really is different from prior years. In the history of Linux, there has never been this much money flowing around. There has never been this much excitement around Linux, this much support for projects, and this much excitement, even though like there have been these trendy distros in the past, that actually converting into people actually using Linux. And all of this is built upon 30 plus years of work to get here, whether that be in the kernel, in the desktop space, in libraries, in toolkits, and I don't know what the future may hold, but I wish the best of luck to everyone involved in this endeavor, because we might be hitting a turning point. And when that happens, if that happens, I don't know what that looks like. But what I can say, though, is just saying this is bad and you wish you had the funding instead, or this project had the funding instead, isn't gonna move things around. That part is absolutely crystal clear. Things are shifting from the traditional holders of the Linux desktop, and we'll see what that looks like. So let me know your theories down below. Do you think this is a good thing? Do you think this is a bad thing? Where do you think things go in 5 years, 10 years from now? And are you excited? Are you worried? Are you a bit of both? I would love to know. So if you liked the video, go like the video, go subscribe as well. If you're on mobile, go and hype the video. And if you want to become one of these amazing people over here, check out the Patreon, Scribes, Daily Bearer Pay, linked in the description down below. That's going to be it for me, and I'm sure some feathers are very ruffled. Something.